My name is Clara Ward, and I thought I understood grief. I believed it was a single, crushing weight you carried after someone you loved was gone. But the day I buried my husband, I learned grief had a twin, cold, sharp, and merciless, called betrayal. The church air was thick with lilies, their sweetness turning almost bitter in my throat. My hands still trembled from the final handful of dirt I'd tossed onto his grave. My chest ached, my eyes burned, but I refused to cry in front of them. I didn't know the storm was still building, and I was about to step right into it. She came to me as the mourners began to leave, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. My sister, Vanessa. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect lies. She leaned in close, her perfume wrapping around me, the same scent she'd worn in high school when she was the girl everyone adored. Back then, it was intoxicating. Now it choked me. She placed a hand on my arm, feigning comfort. Her lips barely moved when she spoke, but her words sliced deeper than any knife could. My heart paused, unsure if it wanted to keep beating. "Clara," she said, her tone low, deliberate, as though she had rehearsed it in the mirror for days. "My son is your husband's child." The words hung in the air, heavy and unnatural, and for a moment I didn't understand them. It was like hearing another language, one my soul recognized before my mind could catch up. My breath caught, my vision blurred, and the steady hum of voices in the church faded. All I could hear was my own pulse, thundering like war drums in my ears. The scent of incense and flowers became unbearable, mingling with the sour taste in my mouth. I could feel my knees weaken, but I refused to let her see me falter. Vanessa's eyes didn't flicker with shame or guilt, only satisfaction, as if she had finally unwrapped the last piece of her secret and laid it at my feet. I thought of her son Daniel, the boy with my husband's smile, the boy I had never dared to compare to Ethan until now. She had waited until this exact moment, the ground over Ethan's coffin still fresh, to detonate my world. I should have screamed. I should have slapped her across the face, demanded answers, demanded why she had chosen this day of all days to gut me alive. But I didn't. Instead, my lips curved into something that might have been mistaken for grief. I looked her in the eye, steady and unblinking, letting her see nothing of the fire that was sparking to life inside me. This was not the time for rage. This was the time to remember her words, to etch them into my bones so they would never fade. Revenge requires patience, and I had just found my reason. As she walked away, greeting another mourner with the same warm smile she had given me minutes earlier, I watched her closely. Every step she took was another thread in the web I was already spinning. The truth had been buried with Ethan, but she had dug it up to wound me. She thought it would break me, leave me hollow and gasping. Instead, it anchored me. Betrayal has a strange way of sharpening the mind, and in that moment, I knew. I wouldn't rest until she felt the same cold emptiness she had planted in my chest. Ethan and I had built a life together brick by brick, or so I believed. 12 years of shared mornings, whispered plans, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone's breath was steady beside mine at night. Vanessa was always in the picture, my younger sister, the one who turned heads when she walked into a room. She was wild where I was calm, reckless where I was careful. People loved her instantly, while I took time to be noticed. I had never envied her, never resented the shadow she cast, because I thought blood and loyalty were stronger than vanity. I was wrong. I was the one who introduced her to Ethan. It was at a summer barbecue in our backyard, long before the wedding. She wore a sundress that clung to her in all the ways she knew men noticed. I thought nothing of it then. Vanessa was simply Vanessa. Ethan had smiled politely, made small talk, and I was proud my worlds could blend so seamlessly. Never in my worst nightmares did I imagine that single afternoon would become the seed of something poisonous, something that would grow in the dark for years before it strangled me. Vanessa was always full of stories, new romances, sudden heartbreaks, passionate flings that burned out before they began. When she became pregnant, she claimed it was from a brief, intoxicating relationship with a man she met on vacation. I believed her without hesitation. Why wouldn't I? She'd always been impulsive. I even stood beside her in the delivery room, holding her hand as Daniel came into the world. I didn't see Ethan in him then. Or maybe I refused to look closely enough. Sometimes the truth hides in plain sight, and we choose blindness because it's easier than pain. The truth began to reveal itself in fragments, years later. A stray comment from my mother about Daniel's eyes looking familiar. A photograph I found of Vanessa and Ethan standing too close at a holiday party. But I brushed these thoughts away. To believe them would mean dismantling the entire foundation of my life. It would mean accepting that my marriage was not what it seemed, and my sister was not who I thought she was. So I clung to ignorance, weaving it around myself like a shield, never realizing how fragile it truly was. At the funeral, the shield shattered. Vanessa's confession didn't just confirm the affair, it rewrote my past. Every memory with Ethan now felt contaminated. Every smile he'd given me tainted by the knowledge that he had shared those same smiles with her. I imagined them together in moments I had thought were mine alone. The way he tucked my hair behind my ear, the way he kissed my neck absent-mindedly while passing by. And then there was Daniel, the boy who had unknowingly carried the truth in. His blood all these years. He had been the silent witness to my humiliation. The final blow came when the lawyer read Ethan's will. It was prepared quietly, without my knowledge, and in it, a third of his assets were left to Daniel. To the world it looked like generosity, my late husband providing for his nephew. But now I knew better. It wasn't kindness, it was ownership. Ethan had ensured that even in death, his betrayal would leave a mark, a permanent reminder of the life he built outside of me. And as I sat there, the ink of his choices still fresh in my mind, my grief transformed into something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. Grief was the perfect disguise. People looked at me and saw a shattered widow, draped in black, eyes red from crying. They didn't see the calculations happening behind them. I accepted condolences with a trembling smile, nodding as they told me to stay strong. Strength was never the problem. Patience was. I let the days pass quietly, all the while planting seeds for what was coming. The key to revenge wasn't rage, it was precision. And I had the advantage of being underestimated. They thought I was broken, too lost in mourning to fight. That was their first mistake, and I intended to make it fatal. I began with the will. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood and old paper, a place where secrets seemed to breathe through the walls. I asked polite questions, feigning curiosity, all while committing every detail to memory. I discovered how Daniel's trust fund was structured, who controlled it, and when it could be accessed. That control rested with Vanessa, which meant removing her from the equation was the first step. I didn't need to attack her directly, at least not yet. I needed to make the people around her doubt her, slowly stripping away her authority and influence. Vanessa's weaknesses were glaring once I stopped seeing her as my sister. She had always been reckless with money, her gambling disguised as networking nights and friendly games. She lived for admiration, unable to breathe unless someone was praising her. And above all, she needed to appear untouchable. Her image was her currency. I made a list in my leather-bound book: debts, social connections, business contacts, and every habit I could exploit. It became my Bible. Every night, I added new details, connecting dots until her life looked less like a fortress and more like a web with threads I could pull apart. I began shadowing Daniel's routine. Not in a sinister way, but with careful observation. School drop-offs, extracurricular activities, the people who spoke to Vanessa at events. It all told me how she moved, who she relied on, and where her vulnerabilities lay. I learned her schedule so well I could predict her next step before she took it. Every piece of information was another weapon in my arsenal. Daniel was innocent, and I would never harm him, but he was her greatest attachment. If I could isolate him from her influence, I would not only protect him, I would destroy her. The plan unfolded slowly, deliberately. I contacted Vanessa's creditors under the guise of an anonymous source who could help them locate her assets. I placed subtle whispers in the right ears, making sure rumors about her financial instability reached her social circle. I planted seeds of doubt in people she trusted, always in ways that couldn't be traced back to me. My leather-bound book began to overflow with names, dates, and leverage points. It wasn't about striking all at once. It was about tightening the noose one thread at a time until she was standing in the center without realizing it. Some nights, I questioned myself. Was this who I wanted to become? A woman defined by vengeance? But those thoughts never lasted long. All I had to do was remember the sound of her voice at the funeral, the calculated way she dropped the truth into my lap like a poisoned gift. Ethan had destroyed my marriage. Vanessa had destroyed my family. They had left me nothing but ashes. So I would rebuild, not from what they left me, but from what I would take back, piece by piece, until their legacy was nothing but dust under my feet. It started quietly, without drama, just as I had planned. The first move was the will contest. I knew I couldn't take back what Ethan had written without a fight, but I could drag the process into the light and make Vanessa sweat. I hired the best forensic accountant I could find, cold, meticulous, and relentless. He tore through Ethan's financial history like a surgeon cutting into diseased flesh. Every hidden account, every unexplained transfer, every shadowed asset was cataloged. I wanted Vanessa to feel the slow tightening in her chest as she realized the neat, comfortable life she'd built was about to come apart at the seams. The next step was whispering to her creditors. Vanessa had always danced too close to the edge financially, but now I gave the push she'd never recover from. I called them anonymously, each time feeding just enough truth to make my lies believable. She's hiding assets, I'd say. Look closer. You'll find them. And they did. One by one, the people she owed began circling like vultures, pressing her for payment, freezing her accounts, tightening her access to Daniel's trust. She thought it was bad luck, an unfortunate string of events. I knew it was me tightening the noose. I played my boldest card through a false identity. Using a trusted friend as my front, I lured her into a can't-miss investment opportunity. It was tailored perfectly to her vanity, a high-end fashion boutique complete with fake business plans and glowing projections. She couldn't resist the idea of being seen as the glamorous, savvy investor. She poured her savings in, confident it would elevate her status. The money vanished into shell accounts I controlled. By the time she realized it was gone, the trail was cold. She was bleeding financially, and the wound was one I made sure could never close. The charity gala was my masterpiece. On the surface, it was a celebration of Ethan's life, a fundraiser for children's education, complete with champagne, crystal chandeliers, and the city's most influential guests. Vanessa arrived in her finest dress, basking in the admiring glances she still managed to command. I smiled at her, offered her a glass, and played the dutiful sister. Then, mid-toast, my planted leak surfaced. A journalist accidentally received proof of her debts and published it instantly. Phones buzzed around the room, whispers spread like fire. The admiration in people's eyes turned to thinly veiled pity and sharper judgment. Vanessa's face that night is burned into my memory. The stiff smile, the trembling hands, the darting glances for an escape that never came. She stayed because leaving would have been an admission. I watched her drown in the social waters she once ruled, every wave fueled by her own arrogance. She tried to laugh it off, to explain, but no one was listening anymore. I stood across the room, nodding politely. When our eyes met, the perfect image of sisterly concern. Only she and I knew the truth, that I had orchestrated every humiliating moment, down to the exact second the whispers began. From that night forward, her descent was rapid. Friends distanced themselves, creditors became more aggressive, and the carefully constructed image she'd lived behind began to crumble. She started avoiding public appearances, her clothes a little less polished, her voice a little less confident. But I wasn't finished. The financial ruin was just the prelude. The real destruction was still to come, and it would strike at the one thing she cared for more than herself: Daniel. She had taken my marriage, my family, and my trust. Now I was going to take the one person she couldn't live without. The accountant slid the folder across the polished table, his expression unreadable. I expected confirmation of Vanessa's fraud, but instead, my eyes landed on an unsigned document in Ethan's handwriting. The date glared at me. 30 days before his death. It was a will, leaving everything, every cent to Daniel. My name wasn't there. Vanessa's wasn't either, just the boy. My chest tightened, my hands trembling over the paper. This wasn't a mistake. Ethan had planned this. He'd been ready to erase me completely from his life, from his legacy, like I'd been a shadow he could sweep away with a single stroke of his pen. I sat there, numb, staring at the ink that felt like acid burning into my skin. This wasn't the man I thought I knew, the man I'd spent years defending, loving, sacrificing for. He'd not only given his heart to another woman, he'd handed over my future to her child. And worse, the will wasn't even legally binding. Yet, which meant he died before making his betrayal official. Some twisted irony spared me, but the intent still shattered me. I realized then Ethan's funeral hadn't been my real goodbye. This was. The accountant cleared his throat, as if hesitant to speak further. Then he told me there was more. Another name. Another betrayal. My pulse thudded painfully in my ears. As he explained, Ethan had been involved with someone else. Not Vanessa, not a stranger, but Lily, my best friend. The one who held my hand when I cried, who whispered comfort when I suspected Ethan's infidelity. Every memory of her smile, her late-night calls, her sudden excuses to be away, rewrote itself in poison. The betrayal multiplied, folding in, on itself like a cruel trick of fate. It felt like drowning. Only the water was boiling. Every shared lunch, every laugh, every hug with Lily became a blade. I saw now why she'd been so invested in keeping me calm about Vanessa, why she never encouraged me to fight harder. She was protecting herself, not me. I wondered if they'd laughed together, those two women who should have been enemies, but were instead united by one thing. Me, the fool who loved them both in different ways. My life was a stage, and I'd been the tragic lead in their private comedy. I walked home that evening with the folder clutched to my chest, the city blurring around me. The revenge I'd built, piece by piece, felt small now, petty even, compared to the scope of what I'd just learned. Vanessa had taken my husband's body. Lily had taken his heart. And Ethan? He'd taken my trust and buried it in the same grave they lowered him into. The rage was still there, hotter than ever, but now it had shifted. It wasn't just about destroying Vanessa anymore. It was about erasing them all. Every last one, who thought they could rewrite my ending. When I closed my apartment door, I didn't cry. Not a single tear. I poured a drink, sat at my desk, and opened the leather-bound book. I crossed out every line that targeted Vanessa alone and replaced it with new names, new dates, new moves. The game had changed, the players had multiplied. And now, the widow in black wasn't just coming for her sister, she was coming for everyone. If Ethan had left me nothing, then I would take everything. And this time, there would be no survivors. By the time Vanessa understood the depth of my moves, the damage was irreversible. The creditors had stripped her bare. The so-called friends she once dazzled now avoided her calls, and the last remnants of her glamorous facade had crumbled. She sold her sprawling home at a loss, her luxury cars repossessed, and the jewels she flaunted pawned for scraps. Daniel's trust was transferred into a structure she could never touch, ensuring her influence over him ended permanently. She tried to fight back, threats, pleas, even public tears, but every attempt only deepened her humiliation. Her world had shrunk to a fraction of its former size. She left town quietly, without the fanfare she once demanded. One day she was still clinging to her old life. The next, her social media vanished, her name scrubbed from charity rosters, and her face absent from the gossip columns she once dominated. It was as though Vanessa had never existed in the circles she so desperately craved. Daniel stayed with trusted guardians, his education and future locked in ironclad protections. Didn't watch her leave, but I heard the rumors that she moved somewhere no one knew her name, that she was starting fresh. I knew better. She was running. Daniel's future was now untouchable. I made sure every cent of his trust was insulated from manipulation, with layers of oversight designed to outlast even me. I visited him occasionally, careful not to let my vendetta shadow his innocence. He asked about his mother sometimes, and I told him enough to protect him without poisoning him. I wanted him to grow up knowing security, not suspicion. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had destroyed his mother to save him. Whether that was justice or cruelty, I couldn't quite decide. Perhaps it was both. As for me, my life felt suspended. I had the wealth Ethan once promised but never truly shared. The satisfaction of dismantling Vanessa's empire was real, yet fleeting. The nights were still long, my bed still cold. I caught people watching me with pity, whispering about poor Clara and her tragic marriage. They painted me as the broken widow, the innocent victim. But I knew the truth. I hadn't been broken. I'd been sharpened. Every whisper was a reminder that appearances were just another battlefield, and I was done fighting for anyone's approval but my own. There was no tragedy here, not in the way people imagined. There were only choices: Ethan's, Vanessa's, and mine. Ethan had chosen deceit over loyalty. Vanessa had chosen greed over family. And I had chosen to dismantle them both, piece by calculated piece. I didn't mourn the marriage that had been rotting for years, nor the sister who had carved her survival from my back. I mourned the years I had spent believing love would protect me. That illusion was gone, replaced by something colder, harder, and infinitely more reliable: self-preservation. When the dust settled, I stood alone, not as the grieving widow, but as the architect of my own survival. I had burned bridges and salted the earth so nothing could grow in the ruins Ethan and Vanessa had left me. People asked if I felt vindicated. I never gave them an answer. Because vindication wasn't the point. Control was. I walked away with my head high, my resources intact, and my enemies scattered. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't peace, but it was mine. And after everything, that was enough. The sky hung heavy with clouds, the kind that pressed down on your chest and made it hard to breathe. I stood there, the cold seeping into my bones, staring at the engraved name like it still didn't belong to him. Ethan Ward, loving husband. The lie was carved in granite. People milled around with sad smiles and pitying eyes, clutching umbrellas and memories they didn't own. I didn't bring flowers. Flowers wilt. I brought nothing but silence, and silence was louder than grief. I wasn't here to say goodbye. I was here to make sure that even in death, he stayed buried in every way that mattered. The priest droned on about forgiveness, his words rising and falling like waves I refused to drown. In forgiveness, that was the language of fools. I wasn't angry anymore, but not because I forgave. Anger fades. What's left is colder, sharper, and far more dangerous. I let my eyes drift over the faces in the crowd. Vanessa wasn't there. She'd fled months ago, tail between her legs. My best friend, the one who wasn't, hadn't dared show up either. In their absence, the space felt cleaner, the air lighter, but still poisoned with the memory of betrayal. I thought about Daniel, safe now, far from the games adults play with each other's lives. He'd never know the real Ethan, not the way I did. That was a mercy. Let him believe in the father he wished he had, because the truth is a poison no child should taste. I'd taken the weight from his shoulders, but mine still carried it, pressing down in ways I couldn't shake. Maybe that was the cost of justice. Your hands come away clean, but your soul doesn't. I could live with that. I had to. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the polished coffin. I imagined them sealing it shut, not just with nails and wood, but with all the lies he told, all the smiles he faked, all the hands he held that weren't mine. I pictured Vanessa's face when her empire crumbled, my friend's expression when she realized I knew. Every memory, every scheme, every whispered plan, it all led here. This was the final act, and I was both the audience and the author. There would be no encore. As people began to drift away, their polite murmurs fading, I stayed. My shoes sank slightly into the damp earth, grounding me in this moment. The cemetery was quiet now, just the rustle of trees and the faint hum of the city beyond. I traced the outline of his name in the air, then lowered my hand. I hadn't come for closure. Closure is a polite word for forgetting, and I had no intention of forgetting. Some wounds aren't meant to heal. They're meant to be worn like armor. When I finally turned to leave, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The door between us wasn't closed. It was gone. Burned to ash, scattered in the wind, just like the man I once thought I loved. There would be no second chances, no haunting memories pulling me back. Only forward. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, I welcomed them, not as a baptism but as proof. The storm was mine now, and I wasn't afraid to walk straight into it,